fish! Let's go fish!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this late night edition of FOF Live, presented by LaPop. That's LAPOP, and you can always check them out on Twitter, Instagram, and at Doral location. We are doing this a day early, as for tomorrow, the Marlins are playing against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Always LA games are usually later for the majority of everyone here in the East Coast. So we decided to do it the night before and give you all our expertise, knowledge on this upcoming series and some more details, including the man behind me, the mystery man, and everything that went on this week with the Marlins. But, of course, I am joined with Mr. Eli Sussman and our guest, maybe not more of a guest, but he is a member of FOF. He is our photographer, Dennis Sosa. Dennis, it's finally great to have you on.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me on.
No, of course. The pleasure is all ours. You've taken easily the best photos out there. We use it for everything. It's amazing. Great work. Amazing work.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you guys.
First thing we do have to talk about is that series beforehand against the Houston Astros. It may be, in my opinion, a series I didn't think the Marlins were going to take. Maybe most people didn't really think that. I think maybe the Marlins were lucky to even get one game. If two might have been just asking for much, but that's exactly what happened. The Marlins did take one game out of the three, with the second game looking a little more that the Marlins could have taken, in the third game with Nathan mostly out of hand by the end of it. But going back to that first game, we had Braxton Garrett, we had Framber Valdez, who went almost, I believe, 8 innings, and then more than that, we had back-to-back homers for the first time since 1998. Just incredible performance there. Eli, talk to me about that first game. How did Brax look, and maybe the offense showing up against an elite pitcher that late into the game?
It was a weird game for Braxton. He did not actually look particularly good, but 5 scoreless innings at the end of the day. Yeah, he was a little bit lucky, I think, any way that you slice it. Only 1 strikeout. It was a very rare outing to throw up zeros with only 1 strikeout in today's game. First Marlins starting pitcher to do that, I think, in 10 years, since Henderson Alvarez, to put up those zeros over at least 5 innings with only 1 strikeout in there. So it wasn't his most convincing outing. And for most of the game, it was very tightly contested, and it made you sweat until those back-to-back home runs, as you said. Even though the first regular season instance of that in 25 years, they did it in summer camp against the Braves just 3 years ago during one of those exhibition games. It was fun to pull that up and notice that it was Jorge Alfaro, Jonathan Villar, and Miguel Rojas, of all people, did it in I guess you call those, it was spring training in the summer, right before they resumed that regular season. So it was the first instance since then, so people could remember that one. Yeah, Jose Altuve did almost everything in his power to win that game for the Astros, but he got very little help. And those back-to-back home runs, as you mentioned, against Framber Valdez, 2 of those against Valdez, who's pitching in his 8th inning. So, yeah, it wasn't like an overwhelming win, but as you mentioned before, this is a team where you can't take any wins for granted against the Astros. The fact that they were able to pull one out, that in itself was very significant, as we'd later find out, because, this Astros team is a very well-rounded team that's hard to beat on any night, no matter what.
Yeah, and going into that second game with the Johnny Cueto game, him 5 1/3, 7 hits, 5 runs, 4 earned. The Marlins did take the loss there. But I want to go to Dennis. Dennis, that second game, the Johnny Cueto game, just what were your thoughts on that? And maybe how have you seen Johnny Cueto now that he's had some run as a starter now since being injured and being given these innings? How have you seen Johnny Cueto so far as a starter?
I mean, he has surpassed all my expectations with his spring training, with the opener against his first game that he pitched against the Twins, and then when he came back during his rehab, I thought it was going to be a disaster. But honestly, like every game, he gives us 5 innings. Yeah, he gives up a few runs, but he keeps us in the game. And I feel like Tuesday was the same thing. He went out there, gave us five good innings, gave up 3 runs, three, and then the fourth one, we all know what happened there. He got out of the inning, and then the mishap in center field happened. So I've been very pleased with him. The only critique I'd have is with Skip in his handling of him. Like you just gotta take those 5 innings and run. You can't leave him in there. And in the 5th inning, they were already like I said, in the 5th inning, they were starting to hit him. Like the contact was coming in such a close game. To leave him in there in the 6th to start the 6th inning, that was you were asking for trouble, and we got it. I feel like to win one game would have been great, which is what we did. But to win Monday night, as we did have some luck, and then Tuesday comes, and that game was there. That game was so winnable. It was very disappointing to see them basically throw that game away.
Yeah, and to your point with Cueto, it's been unusual in that, like in his recent years and even in his prime, when the one thing that he's usually good at is keeping the ball in the ballpark and getting ground balls. And this year, that has not been the case. That's been the one major flaw in his game. And you just never know when it's going to happen, even when he is actually dealing. And he's had a few of those starts now this year where he looks really sharp. He looks legit. And then all of a sudden, very abruptly, it just falls apart at the seams. And when he falls apart, it is run after run, all on homers. Almost every run practically he's allowed this year, it seems like, has been on home runs. So that's a guy where you have to have a short leash, even if he looks good. And even if you need him to like save your bullpen, like it comes at a very steep price when you leave him in a little too long.
Yeah. And with that, I think another thing we have to mention is from Jorge Soler, the game bottom of the 3rd inning, getting his 30th home run, which is something the Marlins have not seen in quite a long time. You go back to the Stanton days in Ozuna. Eli, with Soler getting this 30th home run, how do you think maybe this gives you your review for him, maybe of the season, him getting to that milestone where maybe many thought he probably would have not been able to do that as a Marlin, coming off that back injury, just everything happening between that off season. Just how have you seen Jorge Soler so far this season? And was 30 home runs ever a thought in your head, thinking, going back to last season?
Yeah, but I'd say that was closer to the best case scenario for him to hit 30. So for him to reach it at this point in the season, there's still a quarter of the season to go. He is on pace for 40. He's on pace to join Stanton and Sheffield as the only Marlins ever to reach 40. So that would, if he does maintain that pace, if he stays healthy the rest of the way, then that would certainly surpass my most optimistic expectation. But what he's doing right now, I think it's kind of within the realm of kind of what we thought was possible. If he stayed healthy, they've done a good job of allowing him to do that by having him DH pretty frequently. And it's a little bit more than just the home runs too. He is, like, as a hitter, he's sitting in the 240s, which doesn't sound like much, but it's an improvement over where he's been at other times in his career. It's striking out less than he usually does. And overall, it's just been a really successful season for him, so successful that it seems like a foregone conclusion now that he's going to opt out of his contract after the year. So it's been so good that there's extra urgency for them to actually make the playoffs with him, to make that contract, to make that whole experience fully worth it, is if he is one of the driving forces that gets you in there. He's not slowing down, and he's especially good against lefties. He leads the majors in home runs against left-handed pitchers, and including this one against Framber Valdez, even if against some of the better lefties in all baseball, it doesn't matter. As long as he sees the ball well out of those guys' hands, he is doing damage against it. So he's a guy that can be really in any matchup. As long as he has that platoon advantage, he is especially dangerous.
Yeah, and some more on that second game. I wanted to point out a little bit from AJ Puck, going just 1 inning, 1 hit, earned run, and strikeout. Just on his performance, this is a guy now going from the closer role, losing that position to now where he's just trying to find himself in these middle innings, in the 6th, 7th innings of a game. And I want to ask you, Dennis, with AJ Puck, how have you seen him now fitting into that role? Is that maybe where you would like to have AJ Puck, or how do you maybe see him? You could say maybe a little more in the long term.
Long term, I would like to see him as the closer with the way he started out here, of how strong he was in the 9th inning. But I'm very happy with the way he's bounced back ever since being taken out of that spot. His performance on Sunday, I feel gets over. Like we were down 7-3 at that point, but he kept us. He was in the game when he took over for Brazoban. And I think Tuesday, right? It was Tuesday that he pitched again. I've been very happy with his performance for the most part since he bounced since we acquired Robertson, and I hope in the long term he could be that guy, that 9th inning guy.
Yeah, I want to quickly shout out in the chat, Sean Grant. He was the one that provided some tickets for us to give away just yesterday to yesterday's game. He's flew in from Ireland, he said, for this past homestand to see the Yankees and to see this series as well. So I'm glad you got one epic game in there, Sean, and you got 3 wins overall out of the 6. So yeah, very glad for that and very appreciative to have him follow along with what we do. Yeah, in terms of Puck, he's getting closer to who he was before. For the moment, totally satisfied with Robertson being the closer the moment, and then Tanner Scott is kind of right there with Robertson as guys that I trust so much, and he had another couple solid appearances recently as well. But yeah, with Puck, he's getting closer to what he used to be. And there was just this recent news either yesterday or the day before about JJ Bleday suffering a knee injury, so it seems like his season is over. For people that are rehashing that trade, it's been a mixed bag for both sides for sure.
I feel like that trade could be. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know that trade could definitely it beginning with AJ Puck, definitely the Marlins won there. Then where he was struggling and JJ Bleday was hitting some home runs. The A's won that trade, and now Puck is stuck in the middle of the game and of relief spot 6th, 7th innings, and now you mentioned JJ Bleday's out for the season. So for that, still I kind of maybe up in the air, but maybe you could say the Marlins are winning it just because Puck is still playing and you have Bleday who might be out for the season. But with that, I also wanted to mention a pitcher. I know Kevin's not his guy. I want to talk about George Soriano and just what a revelation he's been for the Marlins. Coming in a bit of mop-up duty, I believe, last game or one of those games, I believe, and then having another inning and a half for the Marlins. Just Eli with George Soriano, how great has he been? Because this is not what the Marlins. I don't believe when they brought him up in that Arizona series, they think they would have a comfortable relief pitcher for the rest of the season, especially that young. And maybe in the beginning, the situations were more blowouts and not really. But now it seems like they're maybe using him in more situations where they can put more trust into him.
Yeah, they're using him as a normal reliever now, not just a mop-up guy. That shift has now happened over the past week, especially with Soriano that we've been seeing. So I was really encouraged to see that for them to make that change because he has earned it. He's performing that way. He is better than I think anybody thought he would be entering the year, and he has solidified himself at least as a piece on this team. If you look forward to what other moves they can make down the stretch. To add pitching, to call up pitching from the minors, I think Soriano's spot is safe for the foreseeable future, unless he gets hurt. I think he's staying the rest of the year because he keeps performing. His slider has been the main aspect of that really jumps out. It's this pitch that it has the highest spin rate of any pitch that anybody on the Marlins staff throws, and hitters haven't yet calibrated for how it's going to move. They haven't figured out in your mind. You think a slider is going to finish somewhere, and his just does not follow that same pattern. So what you see is guys swinging and missing in the zone against Soriano's slider more than any other breaking ball on this Marlins team. That's what really stands out. Is sometimes he throws it right down the middle and he gets good results out of it. So that's ideally, there's still a little bit of improvement to make around the edges here. I'm not totally sold on him as a rotation piece moving forward.
Yeah.
I think in this role, though, he's found a really good niche. It's a surprise in hindsight just because he wasn't pitching that well in AAA earlier this year. So for somebody to have so much more success after getting called up, especially as a pitcher, yeah, that's a little bit unusual, but it's much needed for this team, as we've touched on, with guys like Puck underperforming, with Jorge Lopez being kind of more the same guy he was before the trade, where you just can't rely on him. It's kind of a coin flip as to whether he's going to pitch a clean inning or whether he's going to walk a couple guys. And in this final game of the series, an inning really got away from him because of that, because he kind of played with fire by putting those extra guys on base. And then when a borderline call doesn't go your way at home plate, that led to the floodgates opening. So Soriano is not only I think he's safe on the team, but he should be moving up even more in the pecking order.
Wow.
So it's been a really good story.
So with Soriano, would you guys maybe agree if he a top, or maybe this season, has he been a top 3 reliever for the Marlins this season?
Season overall. Would
you put him in the top 3? Obviously, Tanner Scott is there. Maybe you could put Nardi, and maybe that third spot is Okert, Soriano type. Have he been that good in that upper echelon of maybe relievers for the Marlins?
Well, I wouldn't. We could hear what Dennis says about that, but I wouldn't put him quite that high because of the lack of reps and also because of the way they've used him. They've just used him in situations where it doesn't matter at all. So as good as the results are, it's not really shifting the direction of their season. Or there's very few games at this point that he has actually turned a loss into a win just because he hasn't been given that opportunity yet. So I have him further down behind those guys, all those guys you named, and anybody that's actually been in this bullpen throughout the year. I think actually being available, being used by the team is important as well. But he's, at least from, I guess from July forward, since the start of July, you'd have to say that it's him and Tanner Scott, 1A and 1B. He's really right there with Tanner Scott since July. It's not saying much because so many of the relievers have struggled over the last month and a half, but he's been one of the few exceptions, I guess, over that span.
Yeah. I want to ask you, Dennis, maybe the same thing. How have you seen this reliever rotation been maybe throughout the season with their relievers? AJ Puck coming in and out, trading for Jorge Lopez, trading for David Robertson, the emergence of Jorge Soriano. Just how have you seen this, maybe these relievers compared to maybe we were coming into the season and it was just who knows what was going to happen?
I mean, for the most part, the bullpen has been pretty strong, except obviously for the month of July. And Soriano, like Eli was talking about, hasn't been in enough high leverage situations to put him in that high of a category in terms of the top 3. But overall, I've been pretty happy with the way the bullpen has bounced back since that massive losing streak and that's everything that was happening for in the second half of the season. Nardi coming back, Lopez yesterday, but Lopez has had a couple of nice performances before yesterday, so I gotta give him some credit there. And Robertson's been able to bounce back from the series against Philadelphia. So I've been pretty happy with the bullpen overall.
Yeah, and with Jorge Lopez, Eli, I wanted to ask, how's Floro been doing? I know we talked a little bit in the chat, but how has he been maybe since that Twins trade? Have Lopez and Floro been almost even in terms of value for their separate teams?
You have to give the edge a little to Floro. He's got 7 appearances, only 6 1/3 innings, but it's a 2.84 ERA, and he hasn't allowed any home runs. The peripherals look good. He's been solid. Like Lopez, he's not pitching in super duper important situations for the most part. They're using him as a middle relief guy, not even their setup guy. So they're using him, not putting him in the most important situations. But I think just one notable screw up that he had where he allowed a couple runs, and all the others have been scoreless. He's still allowing. It's been similar stuff, but it's been better overall than he was before the trade. The key to this is that Lopez is under control all of next year, whereas Floro is a pending free agent. So they're betting that they can, whatever's going on with Lopez, they think they can tap into it next year and get a version of him that is close to what it was just a year ago in 2022. That was always a weird trade to me. Even like in a vacuum, especially, and then even when you apply it to the whole team, like I don't know, there's just not that much track record of guys in the middle of the season when they're pitching really poorly, getting thrown into a playoff race and then suddenly pitching good again. I tried to look for examples, and there's not a ton of them. So yeah, with him, it's still more about next year. They're going to keep him in the bullpen the rest of the season, barring injury. I'm just not super confident that Lopez is. I'm more confident in George Soriano than I am in Jorge Lopez the rest of the season. I don't think that's a very bold take.
Okay. Well, I would go from that and we'd move on a little bit to that last game between the Marlins and the Astros, the Jesus Luzardo game. And before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about Jesus Luzardo and Eli Dennis. What is going on with Luzardo? 3 2/3 innings, 5 earned runs, gave up 3 home runs, 3 walks. The Yankees gave 7 earned runs, 4 against Texas, 4 against Detroit. And this last really good outing, great outing was the Colorado one when he went 7. But these last 4 starts, he has not even reached 5 2/3 innings in the start. Not giving up more than 4 earned runs. Just what have you guys seen from him? Is this just seemingly the amount of innings he's going, breaching that max? Is this a point of Luzardo where you may have to send him down or put him on some type of IL or something, put him down to Jacksonville? Just what is going on with him? This has not been the Luzardo that we've seen go 7 innings, 6 2/3, multiple strikeouts. This has just been a completely different pitcher since the Colorado game.
Yeah, I just wanted to pull up his recent games here at the bottom, where amazing Colorado, I think he tied his career high with 13 strikeouts or said career high. And then since then, it's been all bad, especially this last outing, right? I'd say probably the Yankees outing was the worst one. This one was a small step forward just because after the first inning, he kind of settled down a little bit. Like it was more respectful at that point forward, but not commanding his pitches just as precisely as he was early in the year. He's just leaving a lot of pitches that are catching too much of the plate. The actual stuff looks pretty similar overall. The velocity looks similar. So it's not the most obvious sign of fatigue, but fatigue can like manifest itself in other ways as well. And just in terms of not repeating your delivery as well as you'd like to, and not missing your spots, leading to a lot of damage. It's been really weird, especially that home run. This is not Johnny Cueto. This is not a guy where you like can understand why he's not like he's throwing obvious meatballs that are really easy to square up. This is not a guy that should be allowing 8 home runs in a 3-start span, especially when 2 of them are at Lone Depot. Yeah, it's really concerning. The issue with like sending him down or coming up with a phantom IL stint is I don't know how much faith I have in any of the alternatives over him. Like tonight, Edward Cabrera, we expect him. We think he'll actually be up at some point before the end of the season again. But with Cabrera, it's a different type of like concern with him, where he's the guy that obviously his issue is finding the strike zone in the first place. I don't know if that'd be a clear upgrade. There's a reason why he was demoted in the first place. And as outside of him, yeah, it's not just second guessing. This is why people expected the Marlins to make a move to get a veteran starting pitcher at the deadline, because guys like Luzardo are in uncharted territory with their workload. And this is a risk that you run, but just expecting them to maintain what they've been doing all year when they haven't pitched this deep into the year before. So this team the bottom line is that they're stuck. There's not an obvious improvement over him. And if he says he's healthy, and you still believe in him, then they need to just really grind the video and try to find what's going differently in his delivery that's leading to him missing his spots and getting hit so hard.
Yeah, just really crazy. And look at that Astros one you mentioned, Eli, just starting off really badly, giving up. He gave up close to back home runs, but there was a Yordan single, so it was almost 2 back-to-back home runs in the same series.
I mean, well, that's really worse than back-to-back
Yeah,
because there's an
true.
extra base runner in the middle that leads to an additional run. And just to answer a couple, we've got questions from Sharif and from TP Joseph in the chat about Trevor Rogers and even from Mega, but I don't think Trevor Rogers is coming back this year. Last we checked on Monday, he's still not throwing. So that's been really a big bummer for him because he's really the only guy inside the organization that you're like, man, if he's safer. He's a safer player, and he's a guy that, because of his injury, is a fresh arm. You would think. The problem is his arm, for the moment, is so fresh. He hasn't even started throwing yet. So, and that's his problem. He needs to get built up again, and he hasn't even started that. So we're at a point in the season where I think you have to assume that Rodgers is not coming back until 2024. Unfortunately.
Yeah, and we could talk a little bit more on maybe that game. Talk a little bit about the other side. Dennis, seeing the Marlins go up against Justin Verlander, I believe was the first time since 2021, I believe. How did you see the Marlins offensively against Verlander? You had, a burger double in the bottom of the first. You had Jesus, John Birdie, but how did you see them attacking Justin Verlander? Because Verlander still got rocked. He still got 5 innings. He gave up 9 hits, 4 earned runs. How did you see them attacking Verlander?
They were aggressive, took advantage of his mistakes, and just made him pay for it. I wish they would do that more often during the season.
Yeah, it just with that and Eli, before we head on and go a little bit to the break, yeah, we could have mentioned that. Just maybe also your thoughts of them going against Verlander and maybe how they were able to rock him a bit. Also giving him, I believe, this was his worst outing since coming back to the Astros, I believe.
Yeah, with him, this was an interesting one where there was a couple different endings too. It wasn't just one bad ending; it was a couple of different rallies, and they didn't hit any home runs against him. It was just all through the lineup, guys having quality at bats, getting into good counts just by wasting pitches. The fact that it was only 3 swinging strikes in total too by the end of the outing with him as well. That is very unusual. That is lower than any other appearance that he's had all year. So this was just a reminder that the offense is in decent hands. I would say that when they use the same lineup that they used on yesterday, which is sitting, just not to name everybody, but just to name who's not in the lineup. When you sit Avi and you sit Wendell and you sit Stallings, and I guess Gurriel was also the other odd man out. When you sit them and you play probably 9 of your best hitters, then I think it's like an average offense, and maybe even a little bit better than that, which is such a huge improvement over where they've been most of the year. For most of the year, they've been firmly near the bottom in terms of producing runs. And when they actually play their best players now, it's a good combination of power and discipline. And you have a couple guys at the top, in the middle, and at the bottom with Jazz and Birdie that actually run well when they get on base. So it is. That's the encouraging part, is that the additions they made at the deadline, along with guys getting healthy again that were injured, have put their offense in a better situation than they've been in for a while. Since they've been all year, and really since this offense has been, you have to go all the way back to really 2017 to find the time when they had a lineup. They could potentially put together a lineup that is this deep and this dangerous. But before we go to a break, what I wanted to do is another edition of this flipped fish contest that we tried out. I guess this is technically the now the 3rd time that we've done it, but hopefully this is now going to be the smoothest presentation one, where we pick a player that played for the Marlins and played for this upcoming opponent, both these teams during their major league career. We just give you a few hints in real time, and on the other side of the break, we'll see if anybody was able to figure it out. So this is a player time with the Marlins and the Dodgers. I think it works best when it's a former player, so it's somebody that's retired right now. I'll give everybody a little bit of info on this so they can not that one.
Not
this
Jorge
presentation. There we go. So Marlins and Dodgers, catcher, born in 1981, a long career, over a decade, just called it quits after the 2018 season. As you see, a pretty productive career relative to other catcher standards. So played for both teams during his career. And on the other side of the break, we'll see if anybody in the chat was able to figure it out. Stick with us. the other side of the break once again for people to see.
More.
Nobody in the chat yet chiming in. The last time they were able to get, I think it was Sean Millerick last time, but he's not in the chat this one. Former Marlin and Dodger, started his career in 08, ended in 2018. 693 OPS, but over 9 WAR. He had a decent career with both teams. So I think we picked a sufficiently hard one to actually stump people this time. But I'll give it a few more seconds.
42. So with the Marlins, the Dodgers.
Well, I didn't
not
actually.
JT Romito, not JT. I'm seeing JT in here, not JT.
I didn't clue you in before we did this. So do you have a guess, Daniel? Besides, obviously not real.
Not JT. I have one guy. Let me see if anyone has it, so I don't have to.
No, everybody else is stumped. It's time. It's time.
All right,
you have one guess on it.
My guess is AJ Ellis.
It is.
Yes, go
AJ Ellis.
Of course. Dodger legend. Played 1 year with the Marlins, I believe. 2017, I think. 2016, around there.
2017.
He played, it was just that 1 year in 2017, and then he finished his career in 2018 with the Padres. But very well known for working with Clayton Kershaw. I guess, maybe if Lewis was on with us, Lewis Adio Weiss, he may have gotten it because of that relationship. But now we could move on to other Dodgers stuff if you'd like.
Yeah. We could stick on the catching topic for just a little bit, maybe very quickly on behind us. The Marlins signing to a minor league deal, Jorge Alfaro, going up to AAA Jacksonville. I believe he's playing in his first game since returning to the Marlins organization right now, actually. Yep. We're seeing him there in action.
Yeah, I can play his first hit. I have a clip of his first hit.
Oh.
Yeah.
And he's playing catcher, right? Now left field.
Catching tonight. So here's his first single.
Time doesn't actually advance. Feels just like yesterday. The 1-0, Alfaro, a ground ball through the hole left side. Base hit here to lead off the fourth. He's aboard for Dane Myers.
Ooh. Do you know who was pitching?
Who was pitching against him in that one? That was Nick Nelson of the Yankees. So Yankees system? No, Phillies. Now in the Phillies system.
Phillies.
Formerly a Yankees guy. And Alfaro also is showing off the cannon here. Here's a caught stealing. I think I can share here with
you're getting my hopes up, Eli.
Yeah, it might be a little bit choppy, but there he is to Xavier Edwards right there. We can see it one more time. Let's see if they show it. There's a close play. There's no replay in the minors to challenge it. It was a close one. Bam.
Ooh. That was a nice get from Xavier Edwards there, too.
So this is just the first half of his first game since returning to the organization.
Ooh. Is this an update from Jorge Alfaro? Oh, wait, not that one. Oops. There it is. Jorge Alfaro's 2 for 3. Okay.
Yeah, what's the second hit? The second hit was also a single to left field. I guess it was pretty similar to that first one.
So, Dennis, you're seeing all this. Do you want him back? Is the JT Realmuto trade drawing its head back with Alfaro? Just what do you think? Your overall impression of the Marlins just re-signing him?
I think it's time we just move on from the Phillies trade. I mean, Jorge, I guess it's nice to have him in the minors. I guess a little organizational depth. I mean, considering I know we complain about Jacob Stallings. Everybody complains about Jacob Stallings. Nick Fortes. I would probably just stick with Jacob Stallings and Nick Fortes.
Yeah. Well, I would agree that he's not going to replace either of those guys. It's a question of whether he fits on the roster in some way along with those guys once rosters expand September 1st. So a couple of weeks until that vacancy is first open. He's not top of mind. I think top of mind to a lot of people is Xavier Edwards, who is the minor league baseball's leading hitter, plays different positions, and he doesn't strike out, and he's a great base runner. So I think Edwards is certainly first in line for that promotion. But the question is what they do with that other spot and who would be next in line if Fortes or Stallings got hurt. And I think that the answer to who would be next in line, I do think it is Alfaro. I don't think you make this signing unless you're comfortable, unless you think there's a decent
You're
chance
on the
that
Austin Allen hype train.
I was. I mean, Allen he's been having a better, not a better overall year, but he's been better since like the last few months. He got off to a very slow start, and since May, Austin Allen has been a lot like Alfaro, especially not as much of an arm strength. He doesn't have the same arm, but he has just as much home run power, and he has a little bit more plate discipline. Everybody has more plate discipline than Jorge Alfaro. That's what drives people crazy about him. But I do think this is a possibility. I think the signing signals that he'd be the next man up in an event of a catcher injury, because from Alfaro's perspective, why would he sign here unless he thought there was an opportunity to actually make it back up? And I think he senses that there is an opportunity under the right circumstances. The other question is, if he fits on the roster, if they would carry 3 catchers perhaps in September under the right circumstances, just because these other 2 guys, well, in particular, Stallings, just can't hit whatsoever. He can't run. With Fortes, he's actually been playing somewhat better offensively, but it seems that defensively Fortes has kind of fallen off as the season has gone on as well. So that's the tough part of it, where that's why both those guys are flawed. But Alfaro, as people are aware, he has his own flaws as well. It's just the things that he does well are really loud. The hard contact he makes, the strong arm that he has, there's some value to that stuff. The question is whether he could help as like a pinch hitter in certain situations, and whether he could even help as a pinch runner, because that's what has been another thing that's made him unusual, is how fast he is for a catcher as well. He could pinch run for Jorge Soler. He could pinch run for Jake Berger. He could pinch run for Josh Bell. He could pinch run for Stallings. So that's like another tiny thing. There are better guys in this organization suited for pinch running. I'm just trying to see what the Marlins are seeing here. And I think this is more so in case of an injury. And if he actually hits the way that he has this year, as we saw so far, so good. 2 hits already tonight for the year, hitting well over 300 in AAA with good power. So they do see some upside in the bat. And that's reasonable. It's really hard to find catcher offense. And I guess they trust him to translate a little more to the majors than Austin Allen, just because he's done it before. Just going back as recently as early last year, he had some nice moments for the Padres, including one against the Marlins.
Oh, I remember that. That was the Tanner Scott. Tanner Scott gave that up to Alfaro.
No, it was Cole Sulser.
Cole Sulser, that's right. So Tanner Scott was, I believe, Atlanta. He gave up one in Atlanta. Yeah, that's right. Cole Sulser.
Well, I think Scott gave a couple of them, including against the Phillies last year against Garrett Stubbs.
The Mother's Day game, the Alfaro game, what stands out is
what is Cole Sulser
announcing?
Right.
Where is Cole Sulser? I saw him in the news recently. Some sort of transaction. He is not. He's not doing well. Let's just say that.
Oof. All right, and let's go from not doing well to a team that is doing well, really well actually. The Los Angeles Dodgers, who the Marlins will face in this upcoming 3-game set. We will have a reporter over there. Isaac Azut is currently in the air. He is flying over there. Bruce Sherman said, Isaac, you're going to this, and he's flying with Bruce Sherman to LA. And this is going to be a very difficult one. If you think the Houston Astros series was difficult, this is almost a whole different type of monster that you're going to face. Everyone in this lineup has been great so far, even exceeding the expectations that the Dodgers had, and how well players are performing since being traded. Lance Lynn has a 2.3 ERA. Kike Hernandez has an OPS over 800. Joe Kelly hasn't given up. I believe he hasn't given up an earned run yet. It's just incredible what the Dodgers have been doing to these players since being dealt. And I don't know if everyone else here remember when the Dodgers early in the year were in 3rd place. The Diamondbacks were leading. Everyone thought that this will not be the Dodgers year, but we were all wrong. This looks like the Dodgers year and more. Just looking at this lineup, JD Martinez is having a resurgence since that last year in Boston. And then you look at Jason Hayward. This guy was almost out of the league, I believe, with the Cubs.
It was a minor league deal.
Yes, minor league deal was out, and now he's have an OPS over like 810. This is just incredible what the Dodgers are doing with these players. You look at every single one. David Peralta, Dennis, the Dodgers, they're scary. Is there any weakness at all to the Dodgers?
I mean, Gosselin, I think, goes tomorrow against Sandy. I think that might be the game for us to try to take advantage. I mean, with Sandy on the mound against this freakish lineup, that might be our best chance tomorrow. If Sandy can be what he has been in his whole career for the most part. The Dodgers are just scary. There's just something in the water over there. I mean, not seriously, like their organization is amazing. They're like the Rays. Like if you make a trade with them, you better. They're probably winning that trade in the year now.
Didn't I see you went out to LA earlier this summer? Dodger Stadium?
Yeah.
How many were you out there for? How was that?
Dodger Stadium. I was only for Dodger Stadium for one game. I went to Dodger Stadium. I loved that ballpark. I don't know if you said Isaac's going there. I don't know if he's been there before. Great atmosphere. From the moment I got there right before the gates opened, and it just felt like there was always something to see, something to do at that place. Really, really great. It's the second oldest park in the National League, but it doesn't show its age at all.
Yeah, and
the crowd, great crowd too.
Oh yeah, easily exceed 45, maybe even 50 for the series. Eli asked Dennis this question: is there a weakness to the Dodgers lineup or the Dodgers overall? Because looking at this, every guy here has their own way that they can hurt you with Mookie, Peralta, Martinez, Max Muncy, and everyone there. Just is there a weakness at all, if any?
Yeah, there's a weakness, I guess,
Dodgers?
once every 5 days or so with Austin Barnes when he's in the lineup. It doesn't show because he doesn't qualify, but he is. Have you looked at Austin Barnes' numbers this year? He's hitting 123. He's been on their team almost the entire year. He's hitting 123 with his WRC plus, which is on a scale 100 is league average. He's below 0 in terms of he is the worst hitter that has gotten like year-long playing time for any team. Austin Barnes, former Marlin. He's had some good years for the Dodgers. He's been with the Dodgers a long time. He's one of their longest tenured players at this point. But unfortunately, he has become a very one-dimensional, one-tool player. He's just there for his catching fundamentals, and they still like him defensively. So Will Smith, of course, is their main catcher, and he's yet another star that's all in red. He's had an awesome year. And in fact, I think he was slumping recently and then just broke out of the slump the other night with a 3-hit game or 4-hit game. So the only bright spot is when the only thing that gives you hope as an opponent is when Barnes catches. So maybe he catches one game during the series, like the day game after night game for the series finale. Hopefully, that is the one hole to exploit in the lineup to answer your question. Outside from that, the only other is Kike Hernandez. But he's been, as you noted, he's been amazing since the trade. He was awful. He was a salary dump for the Red Sox at the deadline because he was struggling so much. And they paid him based on his track record, where based on the player basically that he was for the Dodgers all those years. And ever since he came over, the switch has flipped again, and he's gone back to being a very good hitter, especially against left-handed pitching. So if he is not that guy to pitch to, then yeah, it's extremely fearsome. I'll pull up the other graphic here because when it comes to Mookie and Freddie at the top of the lineup, we just don't see this ever, that you have two guys at the top of the lineup. There's still a quarter of the season left. And these guys are both at 6 WAR, 6 wins above replacement. They're on pace for 8, both of them on the same team.
Oh God,
guys that have, of course, had Hall of Fame caliber careers, especially Mookie, but in both cases, this is one of their best seasons. They're MVP candidates. Like everybody assumed that Ronald Acuna had this put away, and not so fast. So these guys are still at the very top of their game. There's really no holes, especially in Mookie's case. Mookie continues to be like maybe the most well-rounded player in all of baseball. He does nothing wrong, and those guys have been healthy all year. they have
Played
been
second base for a long stretch this year.
Yes, it's with
shortstop.
Mookie, not just offensively, but the reason why he's been so valuable is he's played some second base, he's played some shortstop. We could get into it in a moment. He's had to play some shortstop just because Miguel Rojas has had another rough year. He hasn't been in the lineup as much as they thought he would be. He hasn't earned it. Yeah, we could get into Rojas in a moment, but that's the reason why those guys are kind of driving this whole thing. Freddie and Mookie Betts. This is a Dodgers team that came into this year with people pointing it to them as being weaker than they had been in recent years, thinking that this is the year that their run of division titles ends. And as we talk here, as I scroll up, the division is basically locked up. They're up by 10 games at this point. And the biggest reason why is because they have those two guys at the top of the lineup that you simply can't do anything to stop.
Yeah, just the way they've all played, and you look at everyone that they've traded for at the deadline, seemingly just turning around from guys like Lance Lynn to even Ryan Yarbrough, who's been in 10 innings has an ERA of 1.7. It's just every player that they get their hands on at this deadline, you're just turning them into gold, turning them into productive major league players, where it seems like other franchises might not know what to do with them. And you also look at them defensively. You know, James Outman has been really good. Jason Hayward, just mentioning him in 2023 is just an insane thing to even mention there. But going from that, I want to go ahead and talk about pitching, because this will also be an interesting matchup this series. You look at this first game, Sandy against Tony Gonsolin, and if they were playing that in Lone Depot Park, I would 100% you got to go with Sandy. But it being at Dodger Stadium, Eli and I were talking about this before the stream, how Sandy has an 18 ERA at Dodger Stadium in his career. Just what happened to Sandy at Dodger Stadium? Is it nerves? Is it just bad luck? Just what happens to Sandy at Dodger Stadium? It's for Dennis or Eli.
Well, let's see if I can find it. I know last year that one is pretty fresh into my head, where he's, of course, in the middle of his Cy Young season. And then he had just an inexplicable struggle. Well, it wasn't totally inexplicable, because that Dodgers lineup last year, as good as it looks now, in the middle of last year, we were talking about it the same way we're talking about, for example, the Braves right now. That lineup was firing on all cylinders during the middle of last season. They just hit him around. Like, it's not the case. It's not the case where he loses his nerves to throw strikes. It's just the cases where he gets hit hard, where is apparent, where maybe he's tipping pitches a little bit. They're picking up something from him, and they just are a team that is every year, and especially this year, probably as much as ever, they're a very veteran team that has guys that look for advantages like that. So last year was 6 earned runs, 3 2/3. The year before was even worse in 2021. That was 8 earned runs in 1 1/3 inning, not even making it through the second. I remember that one pretty well as well. Yeah, in both cases, it's been an issue of getting hit hard more so than it is losing his strike zone over there. It's a tough opponent. He is. Every time he's tried, it's now 3 total starts in his career, and he's 0 for 3 in terms of actually putting together decent outings there. So I'm sure he won't admit it beforehand. Maybe he'll admit it after the fact, that this is probably something that is on his mind, that I think he knows his history at this stadium. The only bright spot was in the All-Star game last year. He made an appearance, and that went fine. But I don't think that really instills all that much confidence. I think that's a different category compared to the regular season stuff. So yeah, it's been hideous. It's been unlike anything that he's had issues elsewhere. And some of it is the quality of the opponent. Some of it is just randomness. Either way, I think he's going to be especially motivated to just continue doing what he's actually doing against all other teams recently, where it's been an amazing run for him over the last month since the break. He has really settled into finally being the true ace of this team.
Yeah. And I want to ask Dennis this. The Marlins, they will be facing Tony Gonsolin. They're going up against Julio Urias and then Bobby Miller, who's having a really great rookie season, just with filling in with the Dodgers for Clayton Kershaw, who's injured but coming back now. just how do you see the Marlins going up against these three guys? Are you worried about any of those three in particular between Urias, Gonsolin, and Bobby Miller?
I'd probably go with Urias. Urias is the one that just being a lefty starter against this lineup, like Eli mentioned. Soler's been powerful. It's been great this year against lefties, but obviously the last few years we've struggled against left-handed starters. So Urias would be the one that I worry about the most. Miller also, because the fact that he's a rookie, I don't think they've never seen him before. He's been so good so far this year. He's somebody else that also worries me. Gonsolin, he's been. I looked it up earlier. His ERA, I think, is close to 5. He's been giving up a lot of contact this year, so I think maybe, he's the one that least worries me. I mean, he worries me. He's a starter for the Los Angeles Dodgers, so they all worry me. But yeah, those Urias will be the one that worries me the most.
Strange year for Urias, where he missed a big chunk in the middle of the year with an injury, came back in July 1st, and several of his early outings since coming back were awful as well. But they're catching him, unfortunately, at a tough time. He's now coming off the last few starts. The last few starts, against the Rockies last time out on the 13th, 12 strikeouts. So that was one of the better games of his career in terms of missing bats with him. Just catching him at the wrong time, unfortunately. With Gonsolin, that the clear advantage is in that first game on paper, you would think. And Bobby Miller has a pretty special arm, that rookie that they've had. This is a Dodgers team that's been relying on a lot of rookies this year. And the reason why they weren't really winning a ton of games during the whole first half is because a lot of those rookie pitchers weren't performing all that well. And Bobby Miller was the exception. So like this year, he's just been a well above average starter. And recently he's back in a groove again. So he's had some ups and downs, but 14 starts overall. And it's a 3.5 ERA, a 3.5 FIP. He keeps the ball in the ballpark. He's just a good overall rookie pitcher. Whereas someone like Braxton Garrett, like there are some days where he still looks good, but he's just been a little inconsistent as this year has gone on. Similar to Luzardo, where he's pitching innings that he's never pitched before. And it's a challenge physically and mentally to get through that when this is a workload you're not used to with him. And what everybody, I think the biggest question, maybe the biggest question is if Sandy can break out of his Dodger Stadium curse, but right there with him is what you get from Yuri and what would be his now third start coming back from his injury. Because the first two have both been mediocre. They haven't been terrible, but they have been well below the standard that he set for himself before getting sent down. So all eyes on him, just as we noted with Luzardo being the guy that really seems kind of lost right now. If you're going to lose somebody, if he has to leave the rotation for whatever reason, then that just makes Yuri all the more essential for them moving forward. We don't know exactly how many regular starts Yuri is going to have left before he reaches an innings workload that they're not comfortable with. So you need to cherish every one of these. There's a lot of pressure on him every single time now that they are relying on him so much, and because we don't know how much is left. So I am going to be laser focused on that game for sure on Saturday.
How do you I have a question. Like I've just been thinking about Yuri going up against the Dodgers on Saturday. I just keep thinking back to that one start against Atlanta right before the 4th of July weekend.
Right.
Like where he finally got like a really deep lineup. How do you feel about Yuri going up against the Dodgers, against that Dodgers lineup?
It's the same kind of challenge in terms of there's just no weak spot until you get to the very bottom, whether that is Miggy Row or whether that's Barnes or that's about it. But during that first inning, he would be susceptible to the same kind of thing that you saw in Atlanta because where it was one loud hit after another with them. And I think that game plan, I like the matchup a little bit more, but the Braves what made them dangerous is that they're an aggressive team whereas the Dodgers, they're a more disciplined team and they're not going to ambush you quite as often early in counts. They'll at least give you a chance to get settled in just because that's the way that their hitters kind of like to approach it as well. So I don't have I feel pretty confident that he's going to get through the first inning this time. I'll set the bar there that I think it's going to go better than the Atlanta one. You can't guarantee success though, because as we laid out, this is at the moment, this is right there with Atlanta as one of the more dangerous lineups in all of baseball. So yeah, that first inning is going to be pretty key for him. If he gets through that first inning, he has a chance. But this is about as tough a matchup as you can get for the Marlins. It's been a tough stretch of the schedule, and they're catching a team that is as hot as they've been all year. This is a very intimidating series.
Yeah. So, any last thoughts for you guys on this series versus the Dodgers before we head into predictions? Because this is a tough. I think this might be fairly easy in terms of trying to predict who might win this series. Might be the MVP that might have some trouble there.
We need to talk a little bit about Miggy Rowe and this being the first matchup between them since the trade. Of course, in spring training, they play out west in Arizona, so there was no interaction there. Not a super surprising trade when it happened. We figured that relationship had kind of run its course. But he's one of the longest tenured players in Marlins history. He's still pretty high up on their leaderboards in terms of games played and hits and appearances at shortstop as well. And he's having a bad year overall. I think I have the StatCast here. Yeah, here. It'll look kind of familiar in terms of what Marlins fans saw from him last year, where he doesn't hit the ball hard at all. He's making great contact. He still grades out really well defensively at shortstop, but he's just, not a good offensive player whatsoever. What you will see is that he is trending up a little bit recently. In those last 50 plate appearances, he's been a more respectable hitter lately. After getting off to an awful start, he had an injury in the middle there, essentially being limited to a really tiny role. This is a team that traded for two guys that can play shortstop at the deadline. They traded for Kike Hernandez. Traded for Ahmed Rosario. They did that as a not so subtle message that Miggy Rowe is not good enough. And so he's not an everyday player. He's not in the lineup tonight for them as we record this in their final game of their previous series. But he does play. I imagine he'll start at least one game during this series, if nothing else, against Braxton on Sunday, because if you remember peak Miggy Rowe, he was good at hitting lefties. So I expect him to start at least one game of the series. This is the organization that he was with, of course, before he came to the Marlins. And but the team itself is winning. He's trending up lately after getting off to a horrific start. What are the overall numbers on him? I think it's still an OPS that's below 600, so nothing special. It looks nice. Overall it looks a lot like what we saw last year, where he was playing through a wrist injury. So this year doesn't have that exact same excuse this time. That. It's pretty interesting to think about how a year ago he was still an everyday shortstop in the majors, and now that this is kind of the fall off that people were anticipating. It's more. Last year was not a fluke. Last year was not an injury. This is a guy that's now 34 years old. It's hard to be a major league shortstop at age 34. It's good for his sake that he is still a contributing part of the team. We'll see exactly how big his role is for them as they play important games and eventually play postseason games. I'll be interested to see what the pregame and off the field interactions are like with his former teammates. Obviously, a lot of his former teammates are still on the Marlins, and it's a good series to have Isaac out there covering it, because I'll be curious to see what he says, of course, about his time with the Marlins now that he's had some hindsight about it to reflect on it.
Yeah, you mentioned Miggy, OPS 571 OPS this season, but he still has a positive WAR. He still has a 1.1 WAR. Most of it, all of it, coming on the defensive end. Just still producing quality defensive metrics for the Dodgers. We could send it off now in predictions, but do you guys have any memories of Miggy with the Marlins, just at all? Anything that comes into mind with Miguel Rojas? All right, going to predictions.
There's some. Yeah, all right. Obviously, some good memories with him. Most of those concentrated in 2020. He was at the peak of his powers.
Gold glove.
Yeah, and he was good with fans, and he was
The bat at the end of the year was fun. I remember that very fondly.
Yeah, giving away his bats. Yeah, to fans that showed up for game 162 when he would do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he loved Miami. It was very emotional for him. But it was time based on the way that last season went on and off the field. Just he was growing apart from he was growing apart from the organization, and so I wish him success over there the rest of his career. However much longer his playing career continues.
He actually hit a double at the game I went to in Los Angeles. I was surprised.
He knew it. He knew someone from FOF used to be fish stripes. He had his he had his sensors on for that. But with that, it's a perfect time to go into predictions. And for prediction time, Eli, let's get that video.
This is prediction time.
It's time.
It's time for prediction time. This would be a 3-game set between the Marlins and the Dodgers. You can go either way. Marlins take 2, Dodgers take 2. A sweep either way, and your MVP can be from either team, batter or pitcher, and your prediction does not have to line up with your MVP. As we're seeing here, I'm seeing way too much Miguel Rojas. I'm seeing way too many Miguel Rojas. And the Miami wins 3-0 Miguel Rojas. Am I seeing that correctly?
Yeah, well, David K. Tobin, he always picks the Marlins to sweep. That is his gimmick. That's why I guess I could pull up the leaderboard in a moment. He's not that high up there because he just always wishes the best case scenario. And that would be a very unique outcome if Miggy Rowe won MVP, but the Marlins swept the series. As we go to the leaderboard, it is a familiar name on top.
Thank you.
1 point ahead of Grant for the moment. I myself am doing pretty well. I've been consistently picking up steam as this year has gone on. Early on, it was the super subscribers kind of in total control of this. And now, as you see, 3 or 4 of our staffers up there. But we encourage people to play along. Yeah, we record all your predictions and we put them in this leaderboard throughout the season. It'll be, you look at the difference here. It's the top 9 names separated by 5 points. It's still up in the air. If you go to fishonfirst.com and click the page right near the top of the screen. Once you get there, that's when you can become a super subscriber starting at just $3 a month. And this is one of the perks, is that we keep track of this contest for fun throughout the season. Still a quarter of the season to go. So yeah, nothing locked up by any means at this point.
All right. So we're going to start off with predictions. Let's start off with myself. Not going to go MVP, this man behind me, but I think this is fairly simple prediction. I'm going to go Dodgers win 3 out of 3. They sweep the series, and my MVP is going to be Freddie Freeman. Freeman has torched the Marlins in the past, known Marlins killer, and he will do it again. Dennis.
I want to be like David and go with a Marlins sweep, but I'll take a Marlins win. Marlins win 1 game, lose 2 out of 3, and Mookie Betts continues his good week, and wins the MVP.
Ooh, Eli.
I am going to go with the Dodgers winning this series 2 out of 3. A guy we hadn't talked about very much as MVP, JD Martinez. Ooh. He has quietly had a very good year in his first year with the Dodgers. If I'm wrong, I will cut my hair. That's a little bit overdue for it. If the Marlins win this series, then that's going to be that's my penalty for getting it wrong. But I do have the Dodgers winning 2 out of 3, and let's see how it goes.
If the Marlins sweep, you have to go bald, Eli. Or Miguel Rojas wins MVP.
That's fair. Yeah, I guess if Sandy throws a no-hitter, maybe I'll shave it all off. If he really exercises all of his demons from Dodger Stadium and does something like that. But
is anybody trying to name their future children after one of the ball players? Like what happened with Mookie Betts this week?
That was pretty great.
If Sandy throws a no-hitter, give your daughter a middle name, Sandy.
Miggy, Miguel.
For anybody that's not aware that it was a guy that named his daughter, the middle name made it Mookie because of that. Because he said if he honored his bet that he made with Mookie at a game.
All right. So for myself, for Daniel, for Dennis, for Eli, don't forget we'll have Isaac for this Dodgers series. And I believe, Eli, we're going to have him for 2 of the Padres one, correct? Yeah.
2 of the Dodgers and all 3 of the Padres.
2 of the Dodgers, 2 of the Dodgers, 3 all the way in Petco Park. So stay tuned for that. Again, Daniel Dennis, Eli Sussman. This has been FOF Live, presented by La Pop. Go Fish.